Hi everyone. In this lecture, we will study about the population and the population growth. Now at very first, we'll see what the population means. The population is basically the group of individuals belonging to same species which occupy a particular ecosystem at particular time and space. For example, there is a population, there's a group of tigers. Now that is a group of individuals together. Now there's a group of individuals like fox, the group of individuals like grass. Now this is a one population, this is another population, this is another population. Now if we combine all the population together, we will make a community. So this is what the difference between a population and a community. So population means a same species, a group of individuals in there, but the community involves a different number of species are possible in particular time and space. Now the population can be differentiated as the natality, mortality, and the migration. These are what we call as the characteristics of population. So I'll mention it here. Characteristics of population. The natality, you must be know that that's called the birth rate, right? The mortality is the death rate, and the migrations are of the two types: immigration and emigration. The immigration is what we is positive, immigration is negative. Now when we say a population growth here, so the population growth is generally is basically it is if this is n, this is m, this is I, and this is E, then we can say that the population growth is N natality plus I, that is the immigration. It must be greater than M, that is mortality, plus E, that is immigration. So this is what the population growth can be defined as in very layman and the easy terms. Now we'll talk about the population growth. Now generally the population growth is understood by the three graphs. The first graph is what we call the ideal graph, that is a J-shaped graph, and the second one is a comparative graph, that is an S-shaped. So let's understand this graph first. What does it say? So the J-shaped growth curve is basically a graph that records the situation in which a new environment, a population density of organism increases rapidly, here showing an exponential growth, but then it stops abruptly, means here it will stop abruptly. Now this abruptly is maybe because of the environment resistance. Let me write it here. And so why it stopped? Because of environment resistance. Example, seasonality. So let's suppose there are certain insects, right? Now in summers generally the insects quantity in tropical countries, it is very huge. So in summers they will show an exponential growth, but as soon as the winter hit, they will abruptly end. Most of them and all of them, the population suddenly declines abruptly. They disappeared current from their existence. Now this happened because of environmental resistance, and this is what the basically the J shape means. Here the actual rate of the population change depends upon the biotic potential and the population size. So we can represent it as dn by dt rn, where the r, basically the r is a biotic potential, that is basically intrinsic rate of increasing the population. So we also call this thing as a boom and bust cycle, as called as boom and bust cycle. It is known by the different names, right? So this type of population growth is termed as the density independent. So let me write it also here. This is density independent. Density means population density, means no matter how large the population is, it is independent upon that, because it is the environmental resistance and the seasonality are the main cause of the abruption. So the regulation of the growth rate is not tied to the population density until the final crash. Now let's jump to the S-shaped. Now the second graph is basically the S-shaped graph. Now in this S-shaped graph, It's uh, basically what we call as a sigmoid growth curve. It is a pattern of growth in which, in a new environment, the population density of an organism increases slowly. Here the slow growth is shown. It slowly increases in a positive acceleration phase, then it increases rapidly over here. That's basically an exponential growth, but then it declines and reaches a stabilization phase. That is where the population stabilizes. Now, this decline actually reflects the environmental resistance, which becomes proportionally representative to the higher population densities. It means here we have discussed a seasonality, but in this case, here the environmental resistance is directly proportional to the population density. Means when there is a slow growth rate, the population was less. Here also the population was less, but when the population increases, then only the environmental resistance criteria comes to the picture, and because of that it stabilizes the population. Now here the point of stabilization or the growth rate is called saturation value. That is basically the value of k we have defined. This is also called the carrying capacity of the environment. So the k represent the upper asymptote of the sigmoid, and it is usually summarized mathematically by the logistic equation density dependence. So this is the basic difference between both of them. So this is what we consider as an ideal case, and this is what we consider as a competitive case. Means there's a competition exists because maybe the scarcity of resources, the scarcity of food, and because of that the population doesn't increase. That is why we reach a stabilization level. So this is what we define as the population and the population growth. Now the similar concept is basically also which is linked to this thing is what we call as the community ecology. Community ecology. Now, as we have discussed that mm, in one particular area there can be a tiger as one population, there can be a lion as another population, grass as other, people as other population. So this is all signifies population, and this signifies as community as whole. Now various methods have been devised to study this community. So it is basically a grouping of population of a different organism found living together in a particular environment. This is what the community means. Now to study this community, there is a one method which has been devised, which is what we call as a stratification. Now the stratification is something like this. We can study through the diagram. So we have grass. First we'll make a small trees here. This is grass. Then, slightly bigger trees. And then more bigger trees are there. So here, if we see, these are the roots of some of them. All right. So here, this is an example of a stratification where these are the rhizobium. These are grass. So like earthworm, right? These are the shrubs. which are basically can be the pollinators, and these signifies the canopy. The canopy is basically a crown of the tree, means how much area of the tree occupy on the higher levels. They can be the fruit insects, and these are called the emergents. That's the epiphytes. So this is how the stratification we study in a community. The stratification means we are stratifying on each and every level. We have rhizobium, we have grass, shrubs, canopy, and the emergence, and each and every one of them occupies a different level. So this is how stratification can be studied, and these also occur, you know, in the ponds and the water areas. So this would be so these are the grasses here. So with this pen, this is algae, there will be planktons, there will be grasses. So altogether this is what we call as a littoral zone. Now this is what we call as a profound zone, and this is what we call as a benthic, means right light hardly reaches here, okay. So this is how we study the benthic zone, benthos zone, and the stratification in the forest. So this is how the basic ways we can know about the community in an ecology. Now let's jump to the next lecture.